Welcome to the People Teaching People podcast. Joining me on the podcast is Jelena Bajic. Jelena believes in community-driven impact that elevates individuals and the collective. She has a special interest in high employee engagement and motivation during organizational transformations. Her experiences have taught her that prioritizing staff learning and professional development always pays dividends through increased innovation, engagement, and productivity, driving greater team and organizational impact. Over the past 20 plus years, Jelena has worked with highly skilled individuals in South Africa, the UK, Saudi Arabia, and Canada in various capacities, from energy advisory as an advisor at Tetra Consulting in the UK, to research operations as the managing director at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. Today, Jelena is the Dean of the Faculty of Business, Environment, Technology, and Continuing Education at NorQuest College in Edmonton, Alberta. NorQuest's purpose: at NorQuest, we transform lives, and when we do that, we transform communities, we transform the world, we transform the future, is so strongly aligned to Jelena's view of the role and impact of education. As an Energy Futures Lab Fellow, Jelena continues to explore the intricate interplay between business, technology, and environmental disciplines, which is undeniably shaping our communities and economy today and will continue to do so into the future. Some of this work is also shaping priorities in her portfolio at NorQuest College with regard to skill and competency development for learners, as well as workforce development. Jelena is passionate about empowering others to act and engages in many working groups, events, and committees. Beyond her work-related commitments, she is also the president of a childcare society, a She Leads mentor, and an avid supporter of the Edmonton culinary and art scenes. Jelena earned a PhD in environmental biology from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. She is trained in business management, change management, and strategic communication. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jelena.
Thanks for having me, Tiana. I appreciate it.
Well, we have lots of things to talk about, but I always kind of like to start with exploring my guests' journeys. And you certainly have such a diverse background with incredible experiences in a number of different countries. And I would love to learn more about you and your story and what sort of led you to where you are and what you're doing today, which I know is a big question.
Yes. Well, I think in retrospect, everything makes sense, but the journey itself hasn't been like a premeditated journey. So I was born in what was Yugoslavia, what's present day Serbia. And in the early 90s, my family immigrated to South Africa, which is where I went to school and university. And it was sort of where I spent some formative years. And this is where part of my accent comes from. When I was at university, I didn't really know initially what to study. My dad said to me sort of, oh, one day when you study engineering, and I thought, I'm not studying engineering. It sounds terrible. So I had just done really well in a biology exam. And so I said to him, I think I'm going to go and study biology, which was an interesting thing because once I started studying that, he himself sort of learned alongside me, I suppose, in a bit of a joint effort. And he transformed his career away from what he did originally, which is electric engineering, into bioinformatics. And I thought that was quite phenomenal being, I don't know what he was, probably like in his mid 40s at the time. And that sort of created a spirit of adventure for me when it came to my own career. I thought, well, I can do anything. It's okay to change things along the way. And so when I finished undergrad, I thought, I'm 21 years old. I don't really know anything. So I'm just going to continue studying until I know something. Because who's going to employ me? What do I have to offer? Which is a terrible thing to think when you're that age. And so I continued with grad school. And halfway through my PhD, my mom, who was an economist, sort of said to me, it's nice that you're doing all the science stuff, but how about a little bit of some real world, like useful skill sets? Maybe you can do something with that. And I didn't really know at the time what she meant, but she gave me a couple of adverts she saw in the paper for a community college that was offering certificates in project management and in business management. And I decided to do it sort of in the, evenings and weekends on top of a PhD degree. I don't know. At the time it made sense. I don't know. And that's actually when I realized that although I love the sciences in general, what I loved a lot more was the business of education and the business of research and the business of post-secondary. And so I made a decision that as soon as I graduate, I was never going to go back into the lab, which I have stayed true to. So I graduated, I earned a PhD, and then my partner and I moved overseas to England, and I was going to enter my first work experience. And again, I was like, I didn't know what I could do, but I also knew at the same time that I could do anything. And so while I was looking for real work, I started sort of on a very short contract with a small consultancy. And that's actually where I stayed the whole time that we lived in England. And that's when I really got to put into practice some of the skill sets that I had learned all along the way during my post-secondary education, but that I didn't really realize I had until I put them into practice. Certificates in project management and business management really helped highlight that I do have those skill sets. But again, applying them was something else. So that first experience was phenomenal. I learned a lot about myself and the work environment and what it means to have a mentor, particularly a professional mentor in the workplace. And then what happened then? Oh, and then so my partner, my husband, we moved to Saudi Arabia, where we said yes to the unknown, and we joined a graduate level university that had just been built in Saudi Arabia, about 80 kilometers north of Jeddah on the Red Sea, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. And that's where I feel I could really I started spreading my wings as a young professional in the post-secondary space. And again, that was due to, first of all, having the privilege of having those opportunities offered to me, saying yes to the unknown, and then making the most of what was available there. And again, phenomenal mentors who, lessons learned through those years in Saudi Arabia keep echoing and being highlighted on a regular basis. So again, I'm so appreciative of the opportunities that I've had access to. So when I was there, I started off in the senior administrator role and then moved into some business management, and then subsequently into postdoctoral and researcher support. So we started an office. And maybe a little bit more about King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, or KAUST. So it was the first of its kind in Saudi Arabia. It's graduate level, it's STEM focused, it's a research university, and it was international, where men and women could study and do study sort of together. And that was sort of pushing many boundaries. And, living in a very international community. So around the university, there is a whole town that's built with all sorts of infrastructure in support of the town operations. And so there were about, at the time, I think, maybe 120 nationalities. Also, I didn't even know how many languages spoken, people from all over the world. And that was that was a phenomenal experience, just to sort of being immersed in this multicultural space. And then we started our family when we lived in Saudi and started making some longer term plans. And so eventually we immigrated to Canada about almost 7 years ago. And yeah, this is where I continue my post-secondary sort of professional journey. I was at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology for about 5.5 years, and now I'm with NorQuest College. And sort of bringing it back to that circle of the way that community colleges, or the community college that I attended when I was in grad school, where I did the training in business management and project management, was really the turning point for me. It helped me realize some of the things that I hadn't realized previously about what is it that I'm actually capable of. And just because I studied something doesn't mean that I have to sort of pursue that as a career for the rest of my life. And so I found such fulfillment in that experience in my career subsequently, in administration of higher education, of post-secondary spaces, and what, I believe very strongly in what education enables for individuals and for communities. And yeah, just that's sort of my journey that sort of makes sense now, but at the time I was like, sure, that sounds like fun. Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. Let's say yes to that.
Well, it is so funny
Yeah.
when we look back and we can see how the dots connect. But at
Yeah.
the time, as we're going
Mhm.
through it, it often isn't that clear. But I love so much how there were these opportunities made available
Mm.
to you, or your mom and dad giving you some nudges to consider some
Mm.
other options and opportunities, and you saying yes to them, which is
Mm.
so incredible. And your dad, being sort of influenced by you and what you were learning in school and taking his own career in a different direction. Because
Yeah.
what a great thing to model, right? That it seems less so these days that we sort of pick that one job and you stay with that one organization, for your whole career journey. Like, I think about my granddad, and he worked for the railroad, and he was with the same company for his entire career and moved up and did different things within that, but that's where he stayed. And even my dad, for a long stretch of his career, although he's done different things, like he was with one company or organization, but it just doesn't seem as common anymore. It seems like there's more movement, but it can be
Yeah.
scary to say yes to things that feel a little uncomfortable and we're not really sure about them. So kudos to you for, listening to those nudges and taking those opportunities and sort of carving your path that way.
Yeah. It's most scary the first time. Subsequently, it just gets easier and easier because I think you build awareness of yourself. Like what is it that you are capable of? Your confidence increases. Yeah, and then amazing things happen.
That wouldn't happen
I believe.
otherwise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at least, yeah,
absolutely.
that has been my experience. But like with anything, is what you make of it. And so choosing adventure and sort of going with the flow a little bit, I think, is what sort of sets the tone for all of it. And that comes from within, right? That's not on anybody else.
So very true. So very true. Now, your current role is at NorQuest College. And
Yes.
actually, prior to being introduced to you, which I'm very grateful to Jamie McInnes for doing that, I really didn't know about the college. So I'm in Calgary,
Mhm.
Alberta. You're in Edmonton, Alberta. So I'd love to know at NorQuest, what type of learning opportunities do students find there, and what is that institution really known for?
Yeah. So I joined NorQuest about 4 or 5 months ago, beginning of January this year, as Dean of Faculty of Business, Environment and Technology, which also includes continuing education. And I never thought that I could be a dean. Actually, I didn't think about not ever being a dean or being a dean. It just wasn't something I had considered. But after sort of looking into learning more about the college when this opportunity came up, sort of my own journey started resonating with what is it that the college stands for. And so over the years, the college has moved from being a vocational college, I think it was built almost 60 years ago, into a comprehensive community college. And so I think we are the largest community college in Alberta. And sort of our sister college is Bow Valley in Calgary. And what the college is known for, I would say, is creating opportunities and transforming lives. I think some of my own journey resonated with the story of the college because I was fortunate to have parents who could give me nudges, and I was fortunate enough to have access to opportunities that maybe others don't. And so I see the college being that place for folks who might not actually have what I had had. And so, how is it that we can transform lives through creating opportunities where people get to not only learn a couple of things, but discover what is it they are capable of? And that comes in many different shapes and forms and many different disciplines. So, from a discipline point of view, practicalness is something that the college is very well known for, engagement with Indigenous communities and learning opportunities, a lot of newcomers, so a lot of foundational learning for newcomers. And then, of course, we have a faculty of arts and science and then the faculty of business, environment, and tech, which is one of the newer faculties, I believe. And so there are many pathways for learners coming in, whether they need upgrading or whether they are ready to go into a diploma program or a certificate program. And I believe we have, I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm going to say 52 programs and professional certificates on offer. And yeah, and our numbers keep growing. The college has grown quite significantly over the last 5 years or so. And a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge comes with that, right? Because you want to embrace and offer the right supports for all the students. And at the same time, you're sort of bursting at the seams and running out of space. But these are good things, right? Because I think there are lots of folks who engage in post-secondary education at various levels, and that creates opportunities not only for themselves, but for their families and their communities as well. And I strongly believe in that. So the full mission and purpose, which is we are who we include, that's sort of our hashtag. And, focusing on being an inclusive community where learning can happen, not only by learners, but by instructors, by staff. All of us keep learning and growing, and the college really makes space for that. And yeah, I really appreciate that.
I do think when you create that really empowering educational space for people, everyone does learn. And creating that safe, welcoming environment where people can have that support and take those steps and kind of get outside of their comfort zone to learn and grow and help sort of take them along a new path. Now, at the post-secondary institutions that I've worked at, so I've worked at the University of Calgary and now I work at SAIT, you mentioned that NorQuest is growing. And I have found at both U of C and at SAIT, things are changing constantly. So when it comes to initiatives and projects and learning opportunities and roles and responsibilities, I feel every week there's something new. And on a very personal level, change is tough, but organizational changes and transformation just take things to a whole new level. So I'm curious, at NorQuest College, or just as well in the other work that you've done, how do you view and approach change when you're working with these large and diverse groups of stakeholders?
So maybe I'll just speak to my faculty, sort of rather than the college-wide space, only because I'm more intimately familiar with what's going on in my own faculty. So as I mentioned, I joined about 4 months ago, and my career path is unusual for a dean position. So usually a dean position is someone with a significant academic background, teaching, which I don't really have. The last time I taught was when I was in grad school. And so, although I understand, the concepts, I don't have the traditional pathway, which is maybe a good thing, maybe not a good thing. Well, to be determined. But I do think coming into this space, that comes with a lot of questions. Folks who have that more of a traditional pathway, it's okay to question these things, and not necessarily, I haven't necessarily been questioned about it, but I've been very open about what my background is and what my journey has been like. And what I found is that, well, first of all, I have a phenomenal team, so that helps. But being open about what my journey has been thus far has sort of encouraged them to share what their journeys has been. And so we have been. And then what we find is that the conversations move towards, well, we each have a different skill sets, and how the combination of those skill sets creates a more enriching environment for us as employees, for our learners, for our instructors. And so really leveraging each other's strengths has become something that's become very important for the team, because when new leadership comes in, there's a little bit of anxiety, because you don't really know who they are or what direction we're going to move into, and so on. And so one of the first things we've done as a team is drafted a sort of a strategic direction document for the faculty. And that was a team effort. And it needed to be a team effort because everybody's voice, I think, is important. And when I say team, sort of that will be my immediate reports and a few other folks who would be part of that, not the 150 staff and instructor, some team. And the reason why we approach it that way, or why I chose to approach it that way, is because I do expect that my team share what is it that the learning experiences have been so far, particularly those who have been part of the department for a very long time, to voice some of the priorities that our instructors have, some of the needs that our learners have, because they already had that knowledge and I didn't. So working together on shaping this document became a great opportunity to maybe discuss some rubbing points that might come along the way. And so we created that, and that is going to be shared with the larger team just next week. so that's very exciting. And the strategic direction document is a single page. It talks about what the opportunity is for the next 5 years. How is it that we fulsomely view the opportunity as the faculty, what the markets are telling us, how is it that we're going to translate it into learning and teaching initiatives, and also how is it that we're going to work as a team and show up as a team. And I think those become very important, because not only is it part of us, part of the story or narrative, how we communicate externally, but internally, what are our expectations of each other, and how is it that we're going to hold ourselves and each other accountable. Again, this document is a single page, and which I think is, it cannot be anything bigger than that. But it's also very much tied to our institutional strategic document, as well as our what would you call it? It's called Reimagine Higher Education. It's sort of reevaluating how we do teaching and learning at the college, and what are some of the priority areas that will come through that. So it's not divorced from those two documents, which are actually our anchor documents. It's very much tied to that, and then adds the flavor of the faculty. And so for me, this was one of the reasons why this was important, is because the faculty is an unusual mix of programs. So we have business and we have environment and tech and energy. And so like business has been around for a little while, so it's established, it's like a well-oiled machine. The environment and energy and tech space is newer, and so it's still got the growing pains. And for me, the opportunity is actually the spaces in between. Business is very much part of, tech and energy and environment, story and narrative and economy as well, and vice versa. And so how is it that we can start creating more opportunities from programming point of view, from initiatives point of view, that are interdisciplinary, where all of these different areas come together and explore the opportunity. And it very much reflects what's happening in our economy in Alberta and globally and federally. So this is very topical. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of enrichment in those in-between spaces. Life is no longer just this or that. It's sort of a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then something else. And then beautiful things happen. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful
Yeah.
things do happen in those in-between spaces, because you're right, the world doesn't operate as these sort of separate schools, programs, sections, businesses. There is that interconnectedness that happens, and that I love that approach of thinking about the spaces in between and the potential that's there, along with the programs themselves. So in looking at education in terms of staff learning and professional development, how do you see sort of that playing a role in organizational change and transformation and getting people on board?
Yeah. Foundational. I am a big believer in tying the strategic or strategy to the growth and development of individuals and teams. I take my own learning and development journey very seriously, and so that's something I share very openly with my team and others, whoever wants to listen. And so I find that because there is constant change and everything's always evolving, having some of those anchors in place. So from a college point of view, I mentioned two. Then the next layer of that is sort of strategic direction document for the faculty, and which is non-prescriptive but very directional. And so finding ways in which individuals can then tie their own learning and development plans to aspects of that. What does it make sense? Am I very good at ideating around new programming or updating the curriculum? Or maybe I'm a phenomenal mentor, and that's something I can be a peer mentor to my colleagues. So building on those strengths, but also identifying, a couple of weaknesses or areas of improvement in support of that direction. So maybe I could be better at, I don't know, using technology in the classroom, or maybe I can be better at group work, whatever. I'm just, pulling on random ideas. But all of these things come together, right? Because if we all choose one or two things that make sense for us in our roles and are in alignment with where we are going as a department and as an organization, then things do start coming together. And yeah, I think separating the two never works out well, and sort of being very intentional about integrating them is, again, where beautiful things happen, magic happens. Because it happens for itself, and it happens for the team, and then it happen, for the department and for the organization. There are various layers of that one can see. So I get all excited about learning and development plans.
No, it is so wonderful, and it is great in having people look at these strategic plan documents and the direction that the institution is taking and finding those personal connections. Like, how does the work that they're doing sort of align in terms of their own personal growth in supporting the direction of the greater whole? Because I think sometimes when we read these documents, it's like, well, where do I fit in this, right? And so taking that time to share with one another and to do that reflection and find those ways to make it mean something to each of the people that are a part of that community can lead to great and exceptional change and opportunity for everybody. Now, with change, as you said, it's not really siloed, right? It really requires that multifaceted approach, especially when we're talking about organizational change. And I find it so fascinating that you are a dean of business, technology, environment, like a real sort of vast range of areas people may think. But all those things obviously are going to have such an impact on our communities and our economy. Now they're having such a huge impact, and they'll continue to do so into the future. And what are some of those ways that you sort of specifically see these different areas intersecting and influencing one another that we should be mindful or cognizant of?
Oh, so many. But one of the thing that comes to mind, and this is because I'm involved with the Energy Futures Lab as a fellow, is the energy transition. And so we have been talking about the energy transition as something that needs to happen or will be happening, but it's something that has been happening for quite a long time. And so the energy transition isn't only about energy, it's about technology development, and it's technology deployment, and it's about supply chains, and it's about purchase power, and it's about workforce development, and environmental impact, and all these things. So for me, it's a beautiful example of how the business of business and business of tech and environment and energy comes together, and building understanding with the general public about what it actually means and how do we engage with those stories. And oftentimes, it's like the people who love the tech will talk about the technology so passionately. People who are passionate about environment will speak about that, very passionately. But again, the story is somewhere in between. How do you bring me along? Do I know how to read my energy bill? Do you know what those numbers actually mean? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Until I sat down and actually started studying it, I didn't really understand it. Do I understand what it means from workforce development point of view? We've built an economy that's very much hydrocarbon focused, and that's okay. And that's what it's been, and that it will change. And so how do we build that resilience and confidence in people that they already have the skill sets that they might deploy in a new way, or that upgrading some of those skills is attainable. It's not scary, no matter what your age. And so I think, like, for me, when I was sharing about my own journey and sort of being a PhD student, and I was so focused in my specific field, and that was fantastic. What I didn't know until I did this other training at the community college was that I was already learning about communications and time management and project management, and about budgets, and like taking care of business, sort of in addition to the area of specialization that I was focused on. And so creating opportunities for folks where they get to practice and apply some of the skills that they already have, but do that in a new way. I think that's where the future of education is going. We don't always need to learn new things. I think we sometimes don't even know what we know. Yeah.
So very true. And I just want to sort of build on that point a little bit, in that, how do you see all this and these overlaps and intersections that I think those stories are coming out more and more. I think people are understanding that it's not so separate. These different fields and areas really do influence one another. So how do you see this influencing what and how we teach students? Because as you said yourself, you were so focused in what you're studying and how you're studying. Our oldest is heading to post-secondary in the fall, and he's wanting to study business. So business, but business, just as you said, it's in so many different pieces of our world and what happens in our world. So how do we sort of shift and change our approach with students that will align with what needs to happen and what's happening more and more in our world?
Well, I think recognizing them that people learn in a different way. I think there is more acceptance of that in the post-secondary space. And so the way maybe that you and I were taught when we went to post-secondary, I think that's shifted already, and I think it will continue to shift. So there's a lot of discussion about open educational resources. So how is it we can make education more accessible without that additional cost of, I don't know, like thousands of dollars for textbooks? That could be. So that's an important and interesting topic that there is a lot of work on. Excuse me. There is a lot of work going on around authentic assessments as well. So we're shifting away from the traditional way we're shifting away from what is it that you could maybe learn from text and regurgitate more towards how is it you would apply the skills and the knowledge you have gained in the classroom. And so that means that we need to, and we are already, I think, as a system, shifting away from transactional classroom engagement to more integrated, applied learning. I think applied previously used to mean lab. Now it's becoming an interdisciplinary space where maybe in business, those that are focusing on HR and those that are focusing on finance and those that are focusing on, I don't know, management can actually come together on the same kind of assessment and actually test and apply the skills that they're gaining in their various specializations, as an example. And yeah, so those shifts I think are really good and important and needed. I was never I was a really great elementary school student. I got all A's for everything.
Very
I
good.
was not so amazing grades, whatever, 7 to 12. I had my areas that I enjoyed and areas that I didn't. But what I learned subsequently, and I learned it in post-secondary more than anywhere else, is that I'm very good at applying knowledge, not regurgitating. So as soon as you would give me a problem to solve, I knew or understood how I could pull on bits and pieces that I'd learned along the way. But if you asked me to, I don't know, draw some kind of cell cycle, I would just be not able to do that very well. And so embracing the fact that everybody learns in a different way, how is it that we can assess that learning authentically that's true for them? And so that more personalized, specialized opportunities, like giving each student an opportunity to shine. Again, that's shifting in the post-secondary space. A lot of conversations and work and action around decolonizing curriculum. And so how is it that we unlearn a couple of things before we learn some new things? And that's a complex space. And so we do at NorQuest, we have a team that's really focused on that and that offers a lot of guidance and supports to our instructors and our chairs in figuring out, well, where do we start, right? It's something that's a long journey and not something that's one and done. And having access to resources and supports on that topic has been really great. Same with anti-racism. I think, forget yeah, lots of biases, lots of things we take for granted, and having opportunities to, hold the mirror up to ourselves individually and collectively, I think is very powerful and much needed. And it's good that some of those things are absolutely a priority at the college. And it's, it's a little bit unsettling, being part of those conversations, because you're uncovering, I won't say you, I am uncovering like layers of bias that I was like, oh, I'm so open-minded and inclusive and amazing. And then you're like, oh, my mind actually went to this. I had this kind of an image, when you're telling that story. And so why is it that's true for me? And what is it that I can change so that my mindset can shift where it needs to shift? And so, yeah. Is that
There's
even, I'm like, where do we, what was the question?
No, I love all that so much. I think all those things really that you've shared are all a piece of, influencing what and how we teach our students. Because, and I like too how you're saying the unlearning. I am right there alongside you. I think, also modeling that, right? That we are all sort of working through our own biases and reflecting and listening and being curious and realizing, we learned about things in a certain way and that wasn't the story. We learned about the story from one perspective and we don't actually know the full story. And so just continuing to be curious and in making that a priority at the educational institutions where we are a part of that community is so important. It sets an important direction for everybody.
Yeah, and that's been what I've learned, is that sort of the case wherever I've lived. There is a degree of that. In some places, like South Africa, significant degree. Other places, maybe not such a significant degree, but still very much present. And so, being very intentional about sort of, why do I think that? Those are hard questions to answer. Like, I just need a break from myself on on certain days. But yeah, it's a global issue, right? And I think it's nice that we sort of are tackling it locally as well, because there's specific meaning over here, but globally there's a lot of that going on, and we can do something about that. And I can see it in my kids. My kids, some of the things that were maybe never spoken about when I was growing up are very much part of our day-to-day conversations, and that's beautiful. And most days I'm like, when they ask something, I'm like, I don't know, why don't we look into that together and let's read a book about that.
Yeah, it is very different conversations happening, and it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
and I love when they ask questions I can't answer. Yeah.
Which happens daily for me.
Oh gosh, I'm right there with you. I'm in the exact same boat. So there were some really interesting tidbits that you shared with me about yourself, and that certainly piqued my curiosity. We've discussed many of them, but one in particular was you shared that the saying, "You don't know what you don't know," gives you an allergic reaction, and I need to know why.
So it gives me, and I think it's true for everyone. And so I think, sometimes being part of conversations where that becomes the default, I'm like, well, I don't buy it, because that's true for everyone. No one knows everything. And so the question or the statement isn't around, well, we don't know what we don't know. But for me, it's around, well, now that we know a bit better or we have new information, what are we going to do with that? Or how in the future we're going to maybe work together on something, so that we don't default to, well, you don't know what you don't know. And I think oftentimes that comes from, when we try and solve problems on our own. And as I have grown and have had more experience and sort of aged, I have learned about myself that I absolutely shifted from solving problems on my own, because I thought that's what was expected, to almost never solving a problem, trying to solve a problem on my own, and bringing on board as many folks as possible and needed, because I have biases and my perspective is my perspective. It's not everyone's perspective. So how can we create something or solve a problem in a way that allows us to look at it from various lenses and points of view? And I just find that's where the power is. And so defaulting to you don't know what you don't know, it's like, that will always be true. There is no instance when that is not true. And so what are we going to do about that is something that inspires me, rather than, relying on, well, didn't know, don't know what you don't know. So that's why. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that makes so much sense. And I think such a powerful shift in looking at that phrase and saying, okay, so what are we going to do about it? What's that action? I think is much more impactful than just accepting, well, I didn't know that. So, oh, well, yeah, it doesn't really move you forward. It doesn't help you grow and progress. Audiobooks. This was something else interesting that you shared with me. So, what do you really think about the question about audiobooks, and is that actually really reading?
Yes. So I used to think, well, I had an excuse. They were like, oh, I don't have time to read. Life was just so busy, and for all sorts of reasons, I maybe just didn't make time for it. So there was never enough downtime to sit down and read a physical book. And then I discovered audiobooks. And so chatting with a friend, the question was like, but is it really reading? I'm like, well, it's absolutely consuming content, and it's art and it's literature, and I enjoy it. And if I don't do it this way, I'm not going to do it anyway. I spend most days doing a whole lot of reading, but it's work related reading, whether it's documents or emails or writing. So I don't need practice in like building my reading skills. What I want is to create space and time to consume some literature. And so discovering audiobooks has just been transformational for me. And because I can listen, yeah, whether it's driving or whether it's, I don't know, walking the dog or, making a meal or whatever it might be. I just find that I consume so much more content and I love it, because it just felt like for years I was not consuming any of that content. It was only work or, as a new parent, parenting books. I don't know what I'm doing. What does the manual say? Yeah. So I love it. I highly recommend it. And absolutely it is reading.
I am right there with you. I love that it helps me look forward to even tasks around the house because I will
Yes.
listen to a book while I do that task. And so then it shifts from, oh, I got to clean bathrooms to I am going to be listening to
Yeah.
Michelle Obama read me The Light We Carry. So, and I
Yeah.
do actually love when the author of the book is reading their book. And I find that very
Yes.
impactful and interesting
Absolutely.
and inspiring. And I'm very much like you. I find life is so busy, and a book of my choosing, if I try and read it in the evening, I fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then I end up having to reread the same pages the next day. Or I do love reading physical books in the summertime when I have more capacity to kind of get into a book, but audiobooks have been a game changer for me too. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear you say that.
Yes.
Now, this little tidbit as well. So I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, and moved to Calgary with my family when I was 2 years old. My dad got a job here. And so my dad and my brother are like diehard Edmonton Oilers fans, but my husband and my kids and I are Calgary Flames fans, even though they didn't make the playoffs this year. Though I know the Oilers are still in at this time. But you shared with me that you had never been to an Edmonton Oilers game. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so, can you actually call yourself an Edmontonian if you've never been to an Oilers game before?
Yeah. I don't know. I think yes. I don't know. Yeah, I find what's interesting for me is sort of experiencing it also through my kids' lives, where there's, like a jersey day, or, oh, now I need to go and purchase a jersey. And okay, where do I even buy something like that? And so I love there is a city spirit around it. And so maybe now that I'm more aware of it and paying more attention to it, maybe one day I'll go to a game. But I can say that over the long weekend or this past week when the Oilers played, geez, whoever they played in the last round, before they played
I would need to,
Dallas,
yes,
whoever
yes,
it
yes,
was.
yes, yes, yeah.
Oh, the Canucks, yeah. So saw my first Oilers game on TV. So I made time, and I was very intentional about watching that because I realized it was an important moment. But yeah, maybe one day I'll go to an Oilers game. Yeah. I do like the spirit of it, sort of the camaraderie and the culture. And there's a lot of it, and like the city comes together, and I really appreciate that. So, from a community perspective, yes, but it's difficult for me to follow the game. I don't even understand the rules. And yeah, maybe over time I'll know more, and maybe I'll buy my own jersey one day. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you circle back and let me know. I think
Yeah.
you would enjoy like the community kind of energy aspect of it without necessarily
Yeah.
knowing all the rules for sure. Our two oldest kids play hockey, so I watch a lot of hockey, but if I had to choose, I love being in the room for the game versus watching on TV. Um, I don't typically sit down with my family to watch the Flames play on TV, but to go to a game is exciting and fun. Even just
Yeah.
the people watching in the crowd. And yeah, I think you would really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll do it next season. I'll go to a game. One of those early games. Too rowdy. And yeah, whoa, yeah.
Right now, I'm sure.
Yes.
So
And
when,
I
yeah,
Googled, the Oilers won last night. So I was like, I
they
Googled that. I was like,
did. They're
okay,
still,
yeah.
and I think it went
Woohoo.
into a second round of overtime. So yeah,
Yeah.
Connor
See that
McDavid
detail?
scored.
Yeah. Didn't pay attention to any of those details. Just looked at the
Okay.
score.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good start.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to have you do a little personal reflection, and
Sure.
just like education is obviously a huge part of you and your story and the work that you do. And for yourself, do you have a favorite teacher? And why maybe would that person really stand out for you?
Favorite teeth, like from
Any point
any,
along the
okay.
way?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do. So, yes, I cannot recall her name, but I think in grade 11, my chemistry teacher, we changed teachers. I think the person that was there previously maybe moved to a different school and a new teacher came. And what I remember, and I don't even know, I think this is true, but what I remember is that I really struggled with chemistry. I didn't really get the concepts, and I would get frustrated with myself that I couldn't really understand. And then when this new teacher came, the way that she would explain concepts just transformed my experience in the classroom. Like I got it. Like I went from not very good to very good in a matter of weeks. And so that really highlighted to me how teaching and learning could happen, how different approaches maybe appeal to different students, and how we could create spaces for everyone to find success, even if it's not their favorite subject. And chemistry was never my favorite subject. But the experience of, feeling like I was just trying so hard and not getting anywhere, to trying just as hard and really getting it, and, doing really well, like it really does a lot for a young student, and sort of building the confidence, not only for that subject matter, but for other things as well. Oh, maybe if I learn this other thing in this kind of a way, it might actually help me. And I feel badly that I cannot remember her name. It was many years ago.
It'll
Many,
come, I
many
bet it'll
years.
come to you.
Yeah.
Just one day when you're not thinking about it,
Yes,
it'll
yes.
pop in your
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
And when you look back at your journey so far, and it's
Mhm.
been a really interesting journey with lots of different incredible experiences, what would be something that you're the most proud of?
Oh, such a great question. I think I'm most proud of, and I don't know when this happened, but somewhere along the way, I discovered that many of the things that I do are not about me, that they're about maybe the team that I'm a part of, a team that I'm leading. And so the change in perspective just removed these self-created boundaries and barriers, and shift in focus away from self and more towards team. I don't know when that happened, if it was a process, it maybe happened in bits and pieces over the years, but that has been incredibly freeing and so rewarding. And it sort of informs how is it that I show up at work. And so if I show up at work knowing there could be my last day for whatever reason, how that impacts my engagement with everyone that I'm interacting with. How is it that I involve others in various parts of what needs to get done in the department? How I share information, how I build ideas or invite others to build ideas so that they are part of all of that work. I think when I started working, it was very much self, and I need to prove myself and shine, and like this expectation of everything needs to be done perfectly. And then shifting towards, how are we growing as a team? What is it that we are learning together, and how is that impacting our relationships and dynamics, and how does that translate into how we engage with, whether it's our learners or our industry partners, or others in the organization. Yeah. So I think that's what I'm most proud of. And I don't know how or when it happened, but it happened. I know that there's been a change, but I'm not particularly clear on when that happened. Yeah. And maybe something else, and maybe this is part of the fulsome story, is that I'm also most proud of in seeking and engaging with mentors. I think they've been such an important part of my journey, and some of it was very intentional and a lot of it was not intentional, but there have always been people in my life that for whatever reason I would engage with on improving on a specific skill or learning something new, and always saying yes to that has been great. And they're not always people who are older than me and wiser and more experienced. In some instances, there have been people that are much younger than me, but who are phenomenal at doing something that I know I needed to improve in. And so, yeah, that has been helpful. And I'm proud of saying yes to that, because it's sometimes hard to admit that you don't know something or that you're having a difficult time with something, and inviting others in and being vulnerable and sharing some of that with others could be tough, but it's also very freeing. And so, yeah, I'm proud of that. So both of those things, and maybe they're related. Yeah.
Those are two fantastic things to be proud of. And you have shared so much wonderful wisdom with us today, but I wanted to see if you had any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you think might empower or support people on their own teaching and learning journeys.
Oh, so maybe I'll just share something that's top of mind for me. I have 3 questions written on a little post-it that are stuck on one of the screens I have in the office. And they help me in many situations. And so the first question is, how did you contribute to this situation? So that's question number 1, a little bit of reflection. And question number 2 is, what help did you offer and what help did you receive? That specific one I heard somewhere and I was like, that's phenomenal. So I wrote it down for myself. So again, good guide for various conversations or even internal dialogue. And then the third question is, what will you do differently now that you know whatever it is that you know? And sort of, yeah, a bit of reflection, a bit of review of actions, and then moving forward, how is it that you're going to improve your game? And I think some of those questions have come after I read Atomic Habits, which was phenomenal, I found. So phenomenal in a way, it's like, oh, I already do some of this. And in some way it was like, oh, there's so much more I can do with this. And yeah, those little questions and those little micro movements make huge differences, big changes over time. And so those would be my words of wisdom, a little bit of reflection, those 3 questions.
Well, I hope you don't mind if I write those 3
Oh,
questions on a
yes.
sticky note and stick them by me, because I think
Okay.
that they are fantastic. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for
I don't
sharing
own
them.
them. I just sort of put them together because they work for me, but I don't own
I
them.
love that. They're beautiful. They're great questions to be thinking about. Jelena, I want to thank you so very much for sharing your time and your story and all your words of wisdom with us today. So, if our listeners want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing and what's happening at NorQuest, where might be the best places to find you?
Probably LinkedIn. I think, yeah, I get to be on LinkedIn quite regularly, although I don't post regularly. So that's on my learning and development and growth plan. More activity on LinkedIn. But yeah, that would be the best way. So yeah, just I think it's Jelena Bajic. I don't know how many of us are on there. So, but yeah,
I will
that would
make
be the
sure
best.
to share that
Thanks.
information in the show
Yeah.
notes. And thank you so very much for joining me today. It was wonderful to connect with you and to learn from you.
Thanks for this opportunity. This was my first podcast. I'm feeling empowered now that I've done the first one.
Well,
Thanks for, yeah, I really
I'm so
enjoyed it.
glad you
Yeah.
said yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you made it very easy for me. So this has been a phenomenal experience. Thank you.